We're off to Santa Clarita for a surprise.
I think it's a surprise that a lot of people
Oh, we gotta make a rapid fire step.
Oh shit.
Okay, so we almost got lost.
Yeah. Good old Tio sent us down the wrong path.
Deadass went off-roading. But we're almost there. We're almost there.
Now we get to see what this one's gonna be.
We are in Santa Clarita, BTW. So you're by the Goodwill area.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Now we're waiting. So we've been here for at least 3 days now. Oh, there it is.
Oh my god, it's there.
And I wonder if you even notice me. And you gotta feel me.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. It sounds so good. Alright, I gotta get gas.
Dude, we got it.
It's like you got it, dude.
Fuck.
Well, now we're gonna have a lot more DIYs on this platform. On the M3s. M3s and M5s. Go to this guy's shop, S85 SoCal.
Well,
It'll fix your car.
when I'm in better health, we're
Oh
gonna
my god.
for this car.
Yeah,
a
we're
lot of stuff.
definitely gonna have a lot more shit for it, but damn.
It's a good platform.
It is.
The way it is right now, it's basically stock. You know, we're gonna have a lot of stuff coming out with it.
It sounds so good.
It's better than an S54, and I think I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that. So we're here at the shop. We're finally getting around to actually doing the inspection on this car, even though we probably should have done it quite a while ago. Tio's been driving it for quite some time, and there has been some issues that have come up that we kind of have to address, so we're going to start getting into it. First order of business is we're going to do a comprehensive look over the car. We're going to completely scan it. We're going to see if there's any leaks, and then hopefully if we don't find anything, we'll move on to doing some fluids and stuff. But the big thing is we're also going to be doing down here these lowering springs for the car, so it should drop the car quite a bit and give it a much more, hopefully better stance. I don't know. Luckily they work with the EDC, so you're not going to lose that functionality, but we'll showcase how to do that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the agenda. So let's see if we find any surprises with this car. So here we are underneath the car. Right off the bat, I don't really see much. You know, looks like a typical 124,000 mile E92 M3. First order of business is trying to see if we can find any cracks in this rim or something, because there is an awful vibration coming from back here. Ball joints look semi-okay. I mean, hopefully we don't. I honestly don't want to find anything. We got a little bit of a sweaty boy on this differential. Possibly the pinion seals on the axles could be leaking a little bit, but that's not terrible. Definitely something happened here at one point to freaking have that happen, so gotta find something. Tires are pretty low, they're pretty shot. These are pretty old actually. Belt's not in the greatest shape. It's not bad, but probably would just replace it. Upper control arm bushing has got some cracking in it, so could be the source of vibration. This sway bar end link is definitely worn. Yeah, both sway bar end links need to be replaced. Front brakes, rotors got a good groove in them. I mean, overall it looks like like I said, 124,000 mile E9x M3. It doesn't really surprise me much. The source of the vibration is kind of get down to the bottom too. I mean, like you said, you haven't balanced your tires or anything. And these tires are old, so they could honestly be causing all the issues. You can typically tell when your motor mounts are shot on your E92 or any E9x M3 when this oil pan starts to rest on this reinforcement plate. So if someone says they've done motor mounts and this oil pan is literally resting on here, you can reasonably assure that they did not do that. So just a quick tip. Overall, I mean, nothing major. I don't see anything would be like, holy shit, that was a bad buy. But we'll have to give it a little more love. Nothing that we can't handle, nothing that would scare anybody away from owning the car, honestly. It's really not in bad shape.
Yeah.
Just needs a little love here and there, and that's really it. So, cool. That's, now that we got that out of the way, we'll start doing the lowering springs, get that, go from there. First order of business, let's take these wheels off. First thing we're gonna do is remove this headlight leveling bracket on the driver's side. There's only one for the front on here on the driver's side, so it's just a 10 mil and use a 10 mil wrench to counter hold it. Just get it out of the way so that way we don't break it, so you don't lose a nut. Just put it back on. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove this sway bar end link nut right here. It's a 16 millimeter that's holding it on. And if you find that it's spinning, you can use a 16 or 15 millimeter open-ended wrench to try to grab the back of the sway bar end link and see if you can hold it. So next order of business, before we even continue on, we're gonna go ahead and open this box right here. And I personally like to disconnect the wires from their holders. I don't unplug them like that. I just get them out of the way like that, just to give them a little more tension. So that way when you're removing the strut, when you pivot it down, you have a little more give on the wires so you don't snag them. Now that we have that out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and take this 16 millimeter bolt right here and this nut on this end. We're gonna go ahead and loosen it up, but not take it out all the way yet. And then we'll go ahead and get ready to start removing this. So depending on your car, your M3 may or may not have EDC. This one actually does. So it has this whole entire connector unit up here. If yours doesn't, it usually just has a cap, it has no wires. So in order to get this one off, we just have to just disconnect it. Pretty simple. Pop this connector off. And in here, you'll see this. As you can tell, someone's already been in here. Just literally lift up on it. Just make sure you just put it somewhere safely because we are going to be reusing this. We just put the jack underneath the knuckle. I usually put it right up on the lower control arm. We want to support it before we start taking off our three 13 millimeter nuts up here. And then once we take these three nuts off, then we'll be able to pivot this entire thing out and get the strut out. Here's the three 13 millimeter nuts. It's gonna be a little hard to see, but we have the special knuckle spreader tool that we've used in previous videos before. It goes literally right behind here. You use this tool to spread the knuckle to release the strut out without damaging the whole knuckle. You could probably use a flathead screwdriver, a really big one, but I don't recommend it. I like to use this. So. Okay, so that's in. I honestly think this is the most difficult part of the whole install, is getting these guys back out. Just make sure you don't get your fingers caught like I just did right now. I typically put tape here. Honestly, I kind of forgot, but make sure to just put tape and put a rag here just so you don't scratch your fenders. So.
Hey, but you took it out perfectly.
Do as I say, don't do as I do. Same thing on this side. Go ahead and support the bottom of the knuckle suspension. Take off the three 13 millimeter nuts. Use your knuckle spreader tool, whatever you choose. Screwdriver, doesn't really matter. And just pull out the strut. For today's video, we're kind of cheating a little bit because we're using the professional spring compressor, but it's the same concept as if you were to get one of those DIY at-home spring compressors. So just make sure you know how to use it and just be very careful. Go ahead and get these spring off. If I can get these like loosened up. If it's spinning, grab a microfiber and some channel locks. Not recommended, but it does work. Typically, when I take any of this stuff apart, I just go ahead and inspect the strut bearing here. Make sure it moves around pretty freely. It's not like grinding or anything. This one's in decent shape. And also just to make sure like the mount isn't actually cracked around here. So just observe that kind of stuff. You can also take a look up here, make sure there's no like major cracks. If there is, I would recommend replacing everything. If everything looks okay, you can just put it all back together. We're putting these H&R lowering springs on. This is the red line. I believe it's like their more sporty like spring set. It's a little stiffer. Right off the bat, you can tell how shorter it is compared to the stock one. The stock one is obviously uncompressed, but it also is a lot longer, so this is going to give you the additional drop. This is also supposedly a lot stiffer, so there is no left or right on the H&R. They're both the same part numbers. The only difference I would make sure the H&R logo faces upright, and that's really it. If you're installing a different set of lowering springs, there could be a left and a right application, so do make sure you take a look at that before you install them. But with these H&Rs, they're both the same, so we're going to go ahead and start putting this all back together. But that's just a quick comparison between these guys and the OEM one. Before I put it all back together, I just take a quick rag, wipe up this guy real quick. This is the spring isolator rubber perch. Just kind of also to make sure it's not ripped or cracked or anything like that. This pretty much keeps the noises down to a minimum. This one's in good shape, so we can go ahead and put it all back together. So we're gonna go ahead and put this all together on the bench to show it's a little more easier. Like I said, there's no left and a right on the spring, but there is an up and a top and a bottom. So make sure that the H&R logo is facing upright. Just go ahead and put it back on. This pigtail stops up against this little rubber stop right there, so make sure that's all the way there. We'll go ahead and put our bump stop and dust boot back on, just like so. Again, can only go one way. Do make sure that this guy is back on. You need to make sure this is 100% back on the car. If you don't, you can break the mount pretty easily by forgetting to put that on. So now we put the mount on, again, slides over. And what I like to personally do is try to get the spring perch, the very end, exactly where it used to rest. Sometimes you can get it on there, sometimes you can't, but I typically like to do it that way. We'll go ahead and put this washer back on. This goes on the top. Again, make sure you don't forget that. And the last thing is to put the nut. That's pretty much it. That's it. She is all back together. So now that we're ready to go back in, reinstallation is the reverse of disassembly. The only thing you have to note, if you may or may not know, on the struts, they have this little notch right here. That goes right into this notch on the knuckle, so make sure you just line that up. When you have it right, it falls right into place. It's really, you really can't put the strut in without lining that up, so just make sure you do that. But this just has to go in like this, just like that. That's all the way in. Then we'll go ahead and take our special tool out, and that pretty much locks it in, so you really can't like move it around. And then just gotta carefully get it back in. Make sure you try not to scratch your fender. Yeah, just like that. And away we go. Just watch your fingers. Make sure you don't smash them on the way back in or the way back out. And that's really it. It's really not too much to it, you know. Just make sure you don't mix up the struts. They are left and right, so make sure you keep them the way you are. When you're putting the strut back in, if you're using the OEM factory top hats, some cars may have what's called an alignment pin. Make sure you get that line back up correctly. There's a spot for that hole to go back in. So that way, I guess it kind of retains the alignment settings, but this one has it, so we have to be a little careful. I believe there's only one spot on these E9x. Yeah, kind of see there's a hole right there. And then if you look down on here, there's that little pin right there. There you go.
You're right.
Just like the left side, right side, same thing applies. Remove the spring safely, swap out your spring. inspect all your components, make sure there's no broken mount, and then yeah, just put it back together. Make sure everything's tight too. So we're gonna go ahead and plug in the EDC. It's pretty simple. It's just 2 pins, and if you look in there, you'll see 2 pins as well. Just line them up. It's really not too difficult. Just be careful don't try to force it. So there you go. Got it in. And this does rotate, so you can rotate it. I usually put it like that. I'll put it like that. And then just put the connector like so. Just have it out of the way. Now we're in the process of reassembly. We put this bracket back on. Make sure it seats correctly. The bolt goes right through it, so make sure you don't get that wrong. Put that back on. Got our 16 mil nut. The nut faces towards the back, so just do note that. And we'll go ahead and tighten that up. Meanwhile, we'll go ahead and put this back on too. This is our headlight leveling sensor on the driver's side. Make sure you don't forget that. Sway bar end link up there. Just like that. And we'll go ahead and tighten all this stuff up. Also, don't forget to put the cables back in their respective places as well. Fronts are done. We got everything all tightened back up. We got our sway bar end link tightened up, our knuckles all tightened up. We tightened up our top nuts on the top hat, and we've got our headlight leveling sensor all tightened up. We got all the wires back on, so this is all completely done. Just make sure to double check your work. Now that this is all wrapped up, we're gonna move on to the rears. So the rears are a lot easier than the front, luckily, on this particular model. It's a single damper with a spring isolated, so it's not like the McPherson setup up there. The only thing you'll be doing, the way I do it personally, is I remove this bolt, and then I remove this bolt, and then this one to give me some more room to get the spring out. And on the driver's side, again, we have a headlight leveling sensor. It's just one 10 mil bolt right here. Take it right out, so that way you don't break it. Pretty simple. Again, you just put a jack underneath this and lower it as you remove all the bolts. And then you put the new spring in, and that's really it. It's pretty simple. So we're gonna go ahead and get to it right now. And there's a nut on the other side. First order of business, remove the headlight leveling sensor on the driver's side. There is a nut, so you have to counter hold it. Make sure you don't lose this. And then get that out of the way. See, that way we don't break that. So if you're at home, you'll be obviously using your floor jack to support the arm. We're using a lift, so we're using a pole jack right here. Same concept applies. Just put light pressure on this to keep the spring from just coming right down when you loosen all these up. First, I'm gonna loosen up this strut bolt, or shock bolt I should say. If you're having a hard time getting these bolts out, just get your open-ended wrench, put it on the back side of the bolt, and just help it come out. And some people choose to, and some people don't. I choose to do it. I just remove this arm right here, because you can swing it out of the way a little bit and get a little more room. And it gives you complete access to the spring right there. So that's really it. And this is the whole reason why we disconnect this guy, because it's a plastic arm. As you can tell, I was pulling down on this earlier. It would have most likely snapped this and you would have had some problems. So that's the reason why we disconnect it. Same thing with the fronts. The rears don't have a left or a right specific. They do have, you know, upper and lower orientation. Again, just make sure that the H&R logo is facing the right way. As you can tell, there's a metal cup in the chassis right here. You're going to be retaining that. You're also going to be retaining the stock spring isolator, so make sure you put the pigtails back in the same location. They only go one way, so you can see that end there. Match it up with that one. Just going to put it in like that. And then the other one I think is on the stock. So stock one. Again, pigtail goes in like that. It all falls into place. So that's how you want it. Bring this arm down. Can be a little tricky, so just be patient with it. We're gonna put it in, get the top lined up. The bottom is the more important one. It's got a notch, so you have to get it in the right spot. Let me take a look. So you can notice that it's got these two little notches right here. This short one is gonna go into the hole right here, where my finger's at. And then this big one comes out right here. So you wanna make sure you get these properly lined up. The top doesn't really matter. It's got a flat base, so it's gonna just mount in there, but the bottom does have an orientation, so make sure you do take note of that. So notice the small little rubber notch is perfectly in that hole. The bigger one is perfectly on this side. That's how we know that the spring perches are in correctly. And now we can go ahead, start putting this all back together and tightening it up. So if you're having a little bit of trouble getting this control arm to line up with the knuckle assembly, one trick I kind of have is kind of prying in certain places where this monoball is, the ball joint technically, and typically you can kind of get them lined up. I use a pry bar to do this, so it can be a little tricky. Just be patient. It will eventually find its way. Make sure you don't cross thread those.
Yeah. Hey Google, what time is it?
So we just finished up this entire side of the car. We torqued all three of these to spec, and we'll put the descriptions for the torque specs and
these nuts too.
We've got all three of the bolts that we removed back in already. They're all torqued to spec. We'll have the torques for these respectively in the description below, so make sure to just take a look at that. Do note when you are torquing these bolts to make sure that you put some kind of weight onto the control arm with the jack. So just push it up just a little bit to where it simulates like if you had the car on the ground, and then torque the bolts. If you torque the bolts with the suspension fully drooped down, you run the risk of prematurely damaging the bushings in the shock, and then the ball joint right here, and also the ball joint in this part of the control arm. So that's why I would recommend trying to torque these with some weight on the control arm with the floor jack before you continue further. But now that this is all done, we're gonna go ahead and do the other side and wrap up this install. So we're all wrapped up. As you can see, the car is pretty much back on the ground, lowered. It's about a 1-inch drop, give or take, depending on, you know, there was a bunch of variables, but about 1 inch is what we got. It's a pretty good height. It keeps everything in perspective where I honestly think the car should have came from the factory. It keeps the, I don't know, like it's just overall a lot better. It's a lot better stance in my opinion. And I think it's the best bang for buck suspension upgrade you could do to your M3 without having to fork out like thousands of dollars for coilovers or something like that. So that's pretty much the wrap of the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It was a pretty quick DIY. It's not really too difficult. Anybody could do it in their driveway, but especially basic hand tools. Nothing special on this one, honestly. So this isn't going to be the last of this car. This is one of the new shop cars that we have here. So we're going to be doing a lot more DIYs in depth to cover as many things as we can on the car. So just let us know what you guys want to see in the comments. If you want to see something in particular, just reach out to us and we'll try to plan for it in the future. But other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate, like, comment, and subscribe because there's going to be a lot more content on this car and a lot more on this little pile of crap over there. So, and the E61, we haven't forgot about that one. There's still a lot of wraps for that one. So make sure to stay subscribed, all right? I'll see you guys later.